Good morning. Welcome to our live talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our live talk program covering the importance of church on your Tuesday morning Rise and Shine. The importance of church we're looking at here this morning as we do our live talk program covering the topic Christ suffered while identifying and blessing the unworthy. So Christ suffered while or because and part of all his suffering while blessing and identifying with the unworthy or those who are poor, those who are normally the downtrodden in the society. So we want to be able to do that, and we want to talk about why it's important for us to do that as we live by faith in the Word of God and in the life of Jesus Christ. Let us pray. Our Father who art in heaven, we thank thee again for the blessings of your word, for the blessings of life, and the blessings, dear Lord, of knowing thee. Pray, Lord, that as you continue to reveal yourself to us, that we might be able to partake and live by faith. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. So looking at this very important aspect of Christ's character, personality, the way he does business, and we want to emulate, we want to live by this as the Spirit lead us, and move away from the worldly principles where we honor might and power, where we honor those who are beaten down and oppressing those who are less fortunate. So this is what I want to do here, and so we start off this morning here and to delve into this idea by looking at Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 through 48. Matthew 5, verse 43 through 48. And it says here, Ye have heard that it hath been said, Thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemy, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despisefully use you and persecute you, that ye may be children of your Father which is in heaven, for he maketh his sun to rise on the evil and on the good, and set it rain on the just and on the unjust. For if ye love them which love you, what reward have ye? Do not even the publicans the same? And if ye salute your brethren only, what do ye more than others? Do not even the publicans so? But be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. So you know the concept here Christ is teaching, very important concept for our life. You salute whoever. You bless whoever. And this is how Christ does business, or God does business. God bless those who are worthy of the blessing and those who are unworthy of the blessing. Not in the context of sin or sinner, but in the context that God just bless. It doesn't limit the sun and its rays. It doesn't limit a person who lives by a certain principle will get the result. You know, I always say, if you have a person that even hate God, but they follow a certain work ethic, they'll get results. Hard work will always pay off. That's just how life goes. And sometimes people tend to forget that. You know, you put in your day's labor, you have put in sorry for that, you have put in your day's labor, and the result of it will follow. And this is kind of how life is. So when you look at this, ye have heard that it has been said, you know, you hate those who hate you. And Christ is saying here that you cannot continue life like this. You have to try to bless those, even those who use you. And more of this is needed in our society at this moment, at this time. The principles of Christ is what is needed, always been and always will be. And so this is why we promote this here. So you don't just salute your brethren. Actually, interesting enough, I saw an article where somebody was encouraged, I guess, as a New Year's resolution for us to get back into the habit of saying hi to people, waving at people, you know, saluting people. And I'd learned this years back that it's just good sometimes just to wave to your neighbors and say hi to them, even the ones that you don't even know their name or who they are. Can't really hurt just to say hi. It's a good thing, and over the years I've found it to be a good thing. Waving to people I don't even know, and most of the time they don't wave back, but then sometimes when they wave back, sometimes they're happy. You know, it brings like a smile to their face because somebody acknowledged them, and I find the same reality in my experience also. So he's saying here, this is part of what being perfect. How I understand this perfection is not has to do with how others treat you. This is going in with the expectation that it will not be always reciprocated. It will not be mutual. It is just the way you behave. Now, it doesn't mean that people will treat you good because you treat them nice. It just means that you have a philosophy of life that you're going to bless. And you know in life, you're going in with the mindset knowing that your blessing will come back to you at time as a curse. There's going to be always people that are thankful because here Christ sent the Son on the people who are good, but he sent the Son on the people who are bad. And the people who are bad or evil, they're not thankful. And you get burned, and that's just part of going through life. So Christ suffered while identifying and blessing the unworthy. It is a strange concept, but it is a concept that really works. It doesn't mean that it is you're accepting the fact of being abused or being treated in an unfair way. You just know that, look, some people will just take what they can take from you, use you and abuse you, and that's part of life. But if you don't do that, then you kind of put yourself in a situation where you kind of start being mean to everybody. And so Christ says, don't do that. Just go right in ahead. And when you start doing that, that's what perfection is all about. It is you just have an attitude that, look, no matter what a person do, I'm going to try to be kind. I'm going to make an effort to be kind. No matter what their response is, my response don't have to be like. And when you live like that, the Lord will bless you. Now in Matthew 26 verse 69 through 75, Matthew 26 verse 69 through 75. Now the difficulty with identifying with the oppressed now. So that's my introduction. Now I'm gonna go to my main thought here, the next two set of verses. The difficulty in trying to identify with the oppressed. In Matthew 26 verse 69 through 75, it says, Now Peter sat without the palace, and a damsel came unto him, saying, Thou also was with Jesus of Galilee. But he denied before them all, saying, I know not what thou sayest. Now here's the first denial of Peter denying Christ. Now this to me is one of the thing where we talk about being perfect. As I say, I throw that thing in there in the beginning, but this is the main thought now. So if I can, I'm layering it here. So what's the most difficult thing in personality trait and in honor and virtue is being able to identify or to still love the person who is being accused or being downtrodden or being beaten up, whether they're guilty or not. So it doesn't mean that you agree with the person's action. It just means that you still recognize that this is still my friend. So say your friend did something wrong, guilty as ever, did a terrible crime, you name the crime, and you still love your friend, but you don't agree with their action, but you still love your friend and identify. This is one of the most difficult things to do because it's hard to, as I say, to use both sides of your brain. They say it's difficult to, some people have it difficult to walk and chew gum. The flip side of that also is when in Christ's situation, Christ was being beaten up not because he did anything wrong, but because he didn't do anything wrong. But yet he was being falsely accused. And when you're in that situation, or you're watching somebody go through that situation, even though they're wrong, it's many times hard to side with them because the powers that be, the majority, is against them. And most of the time, this is where you see the test of character. People believe the test of character is in, like, as our Christ says, waving at somebody. That's the easy part. And for many, that's even difficult. To me, the harder part now, the next step, or the bigger step to me, is when you see somebody that's being beaten up, you say, I'm going to stand for that person. Whether that person done wrong or done good, bad or good, guilty or not guilty. And even more difficult sometimes, or I don't know if it's more difficult, but it is weird, is knowing a person did not do wrong. They do not deserve the accusation and the treatment they're getting, and still stand for them. Because when the powers that be are against a group or an individual, most of the time people lose their honor and they turn aside. They'll turn on you real easy, or they just leave you to suffer. And this has been an ongoing problem because, it's, again, would Christ have died if enough of the people had stood up and said, "Nope, you ain't going to do this"? As I say, no, not today. You can do this tomorrow, but not today. Not on my watch. And it is something that is a part of the character that is so difficult to deal with, because, again, and there's always these sons of Baal or Belial, who they always like to beat up people. And somehow when bullies are around, they seem to have so much traction. And people go along and people is afraid to like shut it down. Because, there's certain things that are going on right now in our society that it wouldn't be on my watch. But there's always these bullies that are supporters. They're nasty, they're arrogant, and they tend to, because of those characteristics, they tend to allow evil to grow. So look at this here. Peter denied. But remember, Peter was the one that was most aggressive out of all the disciples. He was very forward in the sense that he was like front and center when it comes on to, we're going to do this, we're going to get this, we're going to make this happen, we're going to stand for Jesus no matter what. So if you take Peter out, you take the group out. If that makes sense, if you understand group speech. The person that's normally most the one that say, yeah, let's do this. Normally they normally target that person, or the devil will target him. And if he got knocked out, everybody's got knocked out because they're going to be more timid than him. So Peter here goes right in the head. And Peter's doing good. There's two people that's following Christ closely now. We don't know what happened to the other 9 disciples. One of them betrayed Christ already. Peter and John is following closely. They're right there with Christ, which makes sense because Christ is loved by John the most, and Christ's most fervent follower verbally, I guess, is Peter. So John, he's there. He's just like it's there. He's narrating even as he write the book of John. He's right there. He's not going nowhere, but he's not really, you don't find that much is being said. Peter, on the other hand, is there also. And you would expect that, because you expect the most verbally ardent follower would be there, and the one that loved Christ the most would be there. That's what love does, and fervor or zeal does. But yet, Peter was more the target of Christ, so to speak, because Peter was supposed to lead in the preaching and teaching and the establishing of the church. Yet you find out that Peter, he crumbled. Because this is a character trait, as I say, that one has to know that it exists. In other words, know that this concept exists of you stand for those who are being beaten up by the might and the power. And you have to exercise it, because when you get into a certain place where this characteristic need to be called for, it can't be something that, it has to be like a reflex. It has to be something that you exercise, else you will shock yourself. So verse 71, and when he was gone out into the porch, another maid saw him and said unto them that were there, this fellow was also with Jesus of Nazareth. So these young people probably had gone to preaching with Jesus, seen healing with Jesus, and they are like, yeah, we recognize him, right? So these are young ladies, and they're recognizing Peter. They say, yeah, you associate with him. See, people don't want to associate because they don't want to get the stigma that is going to be put on. So notice here, and again, he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. So, it's like when they say with an oath, normally that, normally when we swear is when we're in a corner. I don't know about you, if you have observed this or if you've ever done this, but I've done this in the past. I know what this is like, where you say something and you stand for something, and somebody challenge you vehemently in a way that you're like, wow, you don't believe what I say? Nope, I don't believe what you say. And the next thing you're gonna do is say it in a way, or say it with an oath or a swear, and that will make your words seem to have more meaning. That's normally where swears come in. It's a punctuation or emphasis on what you're saying. So we understand here Peter like really gonna deny, like, I want to separate myself from Jesus because Jesus now is the underdog. You see, when everything is going good, people will identify with you. You know, it says prosperity amass believers and adversity empties out the churches, or make a lot of people run. When everything is good and everything is beautiful, great. When persecution break out, everybody like, I don't want to be I don't want none of that, because what they don't want, they don't want none of the troubles. So they want the good, but they don't want the bad. So when Christ is doing well, his church, his ministry is growing, everything is great, blessings. Oh yeah, people are jumping out of the woodwork. People want to follow him. But when the troubles start, people are like, oh man, I don't want nothing to do with this because I don't want to be identified. See, a lot of time I even believe when, like, say for instance, a person do a mass murder. I think the family is in pain, so to speak, but it's the shame, it's the whole idea that this is my family, blah, 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 blah. Because we all want it good. We want everything to go good. We don't want to admit the fact. This is why social media is such a curse, I believe, because we don't want to admit the fact that we have bad days and that things are going bad, because we kind of have a false idea of life. You think about relationships are good and bad. You have a marriage. Before you even start the marriage, you pledge to be with the person in sickness, not just in health. You pledge to be with the person in bad, not just in good. But everybody on the day of the wedding don't think, oh, the bad days are coming. And I'm committed to those. No, you think, oh, the good days are coming and I'm committed to those. That's what we want. We all want that. But the reality, that's not the reality of life. And so here with Peter and Christ, there were good days. There were days where it was high and soaring. But now the bad days come, and Peter be like, I don't want none of this. This is not good. So this is important for us to recognize that this is just something that we all go through. We don't want, to be, nobody wants to have the child that is a dunce and is flunking and failing at school. Nobody wants to have none of that. But that's part of the possibility. We don't want to be identified, and no church want to be identified that you belong to a cult or you follow a cult leader or anything like that. So the moment that type of accusations start flying, people they get fearful because they don't want to be identified that way. And those are not good identification, but this is what Peter was under. And when you look at it, you're like, this can be very difficult because the whole nation and the leaders and those who are in charge and those who are looked upon as the main line, they're going after Christ. So here Peter in verse 72, again he denied with an oath, I do not know the man. And after a while came unto him they that stood by, and said to Peter, surely thou art one of them, thy speech betrayed thee. Then began he to curse and to swear, saying, I know that the man. And immediately the cock crew. Now, this is important, as you know, you're very familiar with this passage of scripture. Peter denied Christ with swearing. In other words, he said, your speech, the way you talk, you sound like you're somebody that has been around Christ and he rubbed off on you. Your speech betray you. And it is for certain. The more you're with Christ, the more you study the Bible, you pray, you're around the righteous, you emulate Christ. You learn to say yea, yea, and nay, nay, if you know what I'm talking about. Not nay, nay, but in the sense of you're saying, you don't say extra. A person who swears all the time, they always say extra. If you say something to them and they answer you back, then they threw a few curse words there. So the more you're with Christ, you learn not to talk like this and stuff like that. And your speech can betray you. And so the way to prove now that I'm not with Christ, in the cursing is a denial of Christ. So I'm going to show you that I'm not with Christ. I'm going to tell you a few choice words here. I'm going to give you some expletives. And then I'm going to tell you that I'm not with Christ. I know that the man. And bam, you deny Christ. So if you notice here now, this is how Peter was rolling here. But this is how easily it is for us that when a situation arises and we feel that it's not going to paint us in a good light, we can really drop people real quick. We can't say, well, we don't want nothing to do with that person. When things are good, we're good. When things are not good, we're good. So watch that. And watch that in either yourself or your life story. Now, verse 75 says, And Peter remembered the words of Jesus, which said unto him, Before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And he went out and wept bitterly. He clicked. Christ already had told him. So if Christ told you this, and this happened, well, everything else Christ was telling you is real. Christ was telling you that all these things were going to take place, and now you see it taking place. I told you before it happened, so you know what to do. So the Lord here, even in the prophecy of what was going to happen to Peter, was really trying to save Peter's soul. So we recognize this, and we recognize this is something of a human trait. Human beings will sell out real easily. Don't take much to basically sell out for good or bad reasons, so to speak. Because somebody could say, well, what if somebody does some heinous crime? Am I not supposed to deny them? Well, I guess you deny what they do and you reject what they do, but you still, it is what it is. Still a family member, a friend, or whatever. You can't deny that you don't know the person. But people act like they don't know you. And you see this idea. And this is why by the time we come to in Acts, and Peter again was struggling with the same problem because he started to eat with the Jews and associate with the Jews and start to act as if he's not a preacher of the gospel. Then Paul comes and rebuke him for that type of madness. Because you do that. I don't see people do it all the time. They go in a certain crowd or with a group of people or their friends, certain friends, they'll act as if they don't know you. In various different situations. And you're like, why are they acting like that? And when they see you again, they like want to friend you up and want to apologize. And like, no, apologize. I see who you are. You need to just learn to overcome that weakness. It's a weakness in character. And it will lead people to do a lot of wrong. Now in Matthew 11, verse 2 through 6. So now, next layer here. So Christ identified with the downtrodden and the suffering. And we see that he blessed those who were less fortunate. Matthew 11, verse 2 through 6. It says, Now when John had heard in prison the works of Jesus, he sent 2 of his disciples and said unto him, Art thou he that should come, or do we look for another? So remember, when John the Baptist preached Jesus Christ, he preached him as, wow, he's so high. You can't even go down and latch the lace of his shoes or the latchet of his shoes. If he asks you to bring water, you should be so honored. That's how Christ was when John preached. John preached of Jesus Christ that was going to be King of Kings, Lord of Lords. And that is what he is. But remember, he came here to show his true character. He came here to show really what he was. Not what he was in office, but what he was in character. These are 2 different things. You know it all the time in life. You could have a person in a certain political or business situation, office, and one person, is very personable, they're nice, they're down to earth, as they would say. Another person, it goes to their head and they're proud as a peacock. The office doesn't, the 2 people are in the same office, but the behavior is different, the character is different. And that's to me is when I look at Christ, I'm seeing more so, not so much the office is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, but so much more the character. This is where many people, they say, oh, Christ was just a prophet. Because you don't see, you can't say that's God. You can if you understand God. Because remember Christ, when he showed his character to Moses, he says, I'm merciful, I'm kind, I'm forgiving, I do all these things. Character. But it was still difficult to understand because you still, okay, but you're king. I know when I deal with kings or observe kings, they behave a certain way, but you don't behave like that. So anyhow, so Christ came to show his character. So when we see Christ minister, and I think it would be very confusing if you were John. If you put yourself in John's position, it would be very, very confusing. If you put yourself in Peter's position, it would be very confusing, because Peter said, "You're the Son of God." Christ said, "Okay, tell nobody that. You're right. I'm going to build my church upon that concept." Yeah, but how can the Son of God be allowed to allow himself to be arrested? Because as John said himself, I'm the Lamb also. I'm coming to show forth what man will do, to what sin can really do to even the innocent. So you can see how Peter would struggle with that. And you can see the problem with Christ, because Christ is not identified with those who are lordly. He's identified with the poor and the meek. And you can see where that would create a lot of confusion. Even to this day, if you notice, whenever somebody like is of high stature, like a Joseph of Arimathea or a Nicodemus get baptized in the church, it is more of a hoopla. And they think that says, I guess second coming is going to happen because that happened. It is still this concept that today is still here. You really believe that the endorsement of the gospel is the endorsement of somebody that's of high office. Well, when you read the Bible, you find that the power of the gospel is the power of God to be able to take a man from that drain pipe, and he's laid there over that grate on the road, vomiting, and he's going to be there tomorrow and the next day. And he hears the gospel, and he receives of the Spirit, and that man a year, 2 years later is cleaned up in his right mind and living a clean life. That's what is the power. Now, it is a power to save the rich also, but you think about it, everything that you preach and teach, the person can buy the way to it. But that gospel can reach down to the depth of a person who's struggling on drugs, a person whatever. So you see here, Christ here lays claim in everything, and he said, "Look, I came here and I not only live in a poor community, Galilee, where even one of his disciples said, can any good thing come out of Galilee?" He had to live a life of an exile as a young man because the Roman authority, the Italians, wanted him dead. He grew up as working as a carpenter. He just in a basic home life situation, living amongst a carpenter. He has a menial job. He didn't go to any institution of learning. His learning came from homeschooling, so to speak, or primarily at the lap or the feet of Mary. Everything about him is not. You can say, well, you can check off all these boxes and say pedigree. That's not Christ's story. So even his way of coming into life or as an adult is not anything that you would say that's a man you can mark and say that man is going to do great things. So John here asks this question, do we look for another? Because your ministry is not what I was thinking. So verse 4, Jesus answered and said unto them, "Go and show John again those things which ye do hear and see." So the disciples of John came, and I would imagine they observed Christ, and they'd be like, wow, why is he not trying to take the throne, kick out Pilate and Herod and all those guys, and take over? Then he would be able to free John out of prison and all that stuff. And all he's here doing is just helping the poor, the downtrodden, the less fortunate. Why is he doing that? He's just always have these poor fishermen saying that they're part of his ministry. It just doesn't make sense. It's not logical. Probably one of the persons with the highest office, other than Luke, would be Judas, and Judas was about to basically betray the whole ministry and call it a farce. When Christ was left, he was left with the least of the least, so to speak, and his whole ministry was focused on the least of the least. And this is how Christ rolled. And this is important because remember, when things are going good, people want to identify. When things are going bad, people don't want to identify. And Christ's own method was that he continuously identified with those who needed him the most, not those who had all this world's possession and all the money and all the wealth and all the fame. And you can see the difference between when we do things a certain way, we're trying to walk by faith in what Christ is doing. So notice Christ's answer here, which would be even very puzzling, but he said it back and John just accepted it. By faith. I don't believe John fully understood. Because as I say, even today, if you go to, just imagine going to most of the mega churches today, who every week they hear money, 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 get rich, get rich. Riches is a testimony that God is blessing you. And you go to them now and give them this answer. It will baffle their minds because they'll be like, I don't understand. And so you can see the trouble, not just emotionally but intellectually, that John would go through, that Peter would go through, that John when I said John the Baptist, Peter, that evil, what's it called, the one that betrayed Christ, would go through, Judas would go through, because it's just, this is totally unconventional. Look at it. He says here, Jesus answered and said unto them, Go and show John again the things which ye have hear and see. The blind receive their sight. So what's the big deal there? The lame walk, the leper are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised up, and the poor have the gospel preached to them. And blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended in me. So those are powerful. When you think about that, those are powerful. But yet, Christ ends by saying, Blessed are those, or blessed is he, whosoever shall not be offended in me. It can be offensive. It would be offensive. And Christ is just basically saying, don't be. Like, it's almost like you're embarrassed. Wow, this is embarrassing. And this is why I say that character trait is so important. Because Peter, I can see Peter was like offended. You're the Lord of Lords, King of Kings. A few days ago, we tried to put you on the throne. Man, we were hoping to, who's going to sit on your right and who's going to sit on your left. All that was going on. Remember, even John that loved Christ so much, he wanted one in the place, either the right or the left, and all that. So when you see this concept here, Christ was saying, I know you're going to be offended by this. You could be offended by this. But if you're not, God bless you. Please don't be. Don't be offended that my focal point is not trying to get the rich to recognize me and to accept me and to endorse me. Because with political candidate, if the multi-billionaires and millionaires don't endorse them, they can't win the presidency. The rich people and the famous people endorse and the poor people vote. That's the reality. So in this situation, they would never endorse Christ. Somebody said, but how about Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus? See, they came for Christ's body after the fact. They stepped up after the fact. But in the background, they said a few words, but they did not come out straight. So they could not. One thing what Peter didn't deny, who was with Christ, they never even came out and said, we accept, much less to deny. It was the poor. So again, I'll read it to you. The blind receive sight. Remember, one of the person that they had the biggest problem with, the Pharisees, I should say, which was the religious elite, they had a problem with the blind man. They wanted to disfellowship him for saying that Christ gave him sight. And in the healing of the blind man, it could not be controverted because it wasn't like somebody got sick and they were losing their eye the eyesight for a few months, and then they got back eyesight because they took some natural remedies. This was somebody who was born that way. If you look at Christ, almost all his miracles were people that were born that way, or people were sick where the sickness was so conclusive that you couldn't say, oh yeah, it was some sleight of hand or some trickery. They were really confirmed by the masses that they were like that. the leper cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead raised. You can't argue with that. And the poor of the gospel preach to them. Again, this is what happened. Because you think about it, some of the worst problems that we're facing right now is the downtrodden, the poor, those who are in the marginalized section of the society, those who are being passed by. Because again, it's easy to go to a rich community and say, hey, you're blessed because God gave you money. Okay, well, I was blessed before you came preaching, and I'm blessed after you came preaching. What's your point? But when you see the poor man receive the gospel and does better, it's a bigger testimony. And yet, at that point, Christ would say, hey, look, you agree, right? I'm doing powerful ministry here. Christ doesn't end by saying that. Christ ends by saying, I hope you can still identify with me as I identify with these poor people. Blessed is he whosoever shall not be offended by me. And I hope today, this morning, as you listen to me here, that you too can identify with Christ and move forward in this type of building ministries and doing things that is aligned with what this is being said. So often I've observed in the church and in the churches this old concept where it's like the church is always waiting to exhale. They're always waiting for the next big hit. They glorify. It's like these poor sinners just waiting for somebody of some name and fame to accept the message. And yet, Christ did not ignore that per se. There's one example of, as I said, Joseph coming to him. But the whole idea was Christ was like, look, I'm going to tell you, my best work is this work. And this is where I lay my claim. This is what made me great. What made me great is that I can preach the gospel and you can see the result of just the Lord people. Normally you see is this idea that if, you've seen it too, where they will take somebody that's very famous, a famous musician, a famous actor, a famous somebody, and say, hey, this person have joined the church. And when you listen to the interview, barely, basically is the person standing on a chalk line, on a string. Life is altogether still secular, but they will talk a little talk of religion. And they'll parade and say, this is an example of somebody that is now accepted. You accepted what? But it is just this whole idea they waited to exhale, always waiting for something like that. But we love Jesus Christ because Christ, under that type of pressure, where you will look upon as wrong because the leading men did not accept your ministry and your teaching. So hence, because they didn't accept it, is an endorsement that it's a statement that you're wrong. Christ didn't worry about that. Christ just kept on preaching. Peter, on the other hand, be like, oh, Christ is the underdog, I'm denying him. Because he's not like the big guys. If the big guys if the Pharisees and Sadducees and the scribes, it pains me so much because I've had people that I've dealt with who, I thought they had something to offer. And the only thing that they keep saying is some theologian has endorsed my work or recognized my work. And these theologians could even, as I say, spit on them if they were on fire to help quench the fire. But they say, oh yeah, they recognize me to some degree, to something. And I'm like, man, your biggest endorsement if somebody hear you preaching and teaching and they're coming from the pits of hell and they change your life. That to me is the biggest endorsement. That's where the excitement is. And normally it's why I think the work don't move forward, because too many of people who want to preach and do the gospel, they think some great somebody somewhere must endorse them. They don't see that it's when the person who is most in need, and not need because everybody's not in need, but need because they recognize their need. The person that recognizes their need the most and receive the most of the gospel, drink the most of the cup of blessing that Jesus offers, that's that person that is really a testimony of the goodness of the Lord. And that's what I believe. No matter who it is, no matter how rich the person is or poor it is, the person that really seriously take up the arm of salvation and walk by faith in Jesus Christ, that's the testimony. So here, Christ says, whosoever shall not be offended in me, whosoever shall not, because I'm the lowly teacher of Galilee, because I'm teaching here and I have no massive palace, no massive nothing, and I'm just preaching. I'm out there on what you call it, in the grass preaching, and that's it. If you can accept that teacher, God bless you. If you can identify with that Jesus, God bless you. So people say, oh, we all serve the same God. Not really. Yeah, we serve the concept of God, but the character of who God really is, that is the difference. That is what most people find hard to accept. This is why people make God into all kind of images and concepts, because they accept the concept of there is a being that's out there. But do they accept that being, that character, that personality? Do they identify publicly with Jesus, or do they publicly deny Christ? Because Christ doesn't fit the mold of the secular mind and the religious and the political and the social elite. And that's basically is the difference between, to me, religious groups and religions and various different groups, is what exactly the Jesus that you have accepted? Who is the Jesus that you have identified with and you see as worthy of your blessing and your honor and your support and your prayer? Because different people have a different view. Some people see Jesus more like Santa Claus. Some people see Jesus, more like a father, or God more like a father that is just spoiling them rotten. And that's their, candy and ice cream view of Jesus or God. Some people see Jesus as like a lovesick puppy, and he's just sappy and loving. Others see God as wrathful and vengeful. And so, yeah, we serve the same God per se, as being there's a divine being that is above. But what is your view of him? What is the imagery in your mind of God? And that changes all this concept of, oh, we worship the same God. Because not in thought or by truth, we might not worship in the same truth. Now in 1 Peter 3, verse 17 and 18, 1 Peter 3, verse 17 and 18 says, for it is better, if the will of God be so, that ye suffer for well-doing than for evil-doing. For Christ also had once suffered for sin, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. So Christ had suffered, the just for the unjust. As Paul also said in another place, he says that, normally you don't really, it scarcely does a man suffer for those who don't even not worthy of suffering. See, Christ here came and identified with us in our lowly state. But we too need to identify with Jesus. See, that's important to me. See, Christ suffered the just. He didn't do anything wrong for the unjust. That means he says, I'll be with them, I'll bless them. He blessed those who more so probably didn't deserve of the blessing. And we in turn likewise learn from him, emulate him, believe in him, accept his sacrifice for sins, and recognize the fact that while Christ identified with me, a sinner, I should not be ashamed to be identified with Christ, the righteous, but that came and lived as if he was living under the curse, as if he deserved a tough life. He deserved to live in poverty because he was poor in character, although he was not. He lived in a way so that we can love those who live the way he lived. Somebody say, I can't love those who are less fortunate. I can't love those who are from the ghetto. I can't love those who are not part of the elite of society or so forth. But Christ says, yes, you can. If you love me, that's who you love in, because that's how I came and live, to save you and to tell you that you should love the brethren, no matter who they are. So Christ identified with us in our poor state by his lifestyle. By his lifestyle, it's almost like he's endorsing a certain way. He said, look, I'm going to show you. Proverbs 21, verse 13. It says, whosoever stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. So this is tough because Christ is saying here, and this is Old Testament again, this is Proverbs. So it was always there. It's there throughout the Bible, but somehow I think probably when the moment we are born, and I don't know if it is nurture or if it's nature because of sin, the sinful nature. We want to be served. We want to live large. We want to basically have people worship at our feet. That's why so many people want to become stars and so forth. But at the end of the day, Christ says, look, that's not the life I want you to live. So he says, I want you to live a life that if you're blessed, I want you to bless others. I want you to identify with them. I want you to be their comfort, be their blessing. So he says, whosoever stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. This is why it is probably very disconcerting and troubling what's happening right now as we speak in our nation, where those who are religious conservatives are saying, well, we're suffering. We need some relief. And how we were going to get that relief is that we want all the people who are here because of natural disasters and violence and wars in their foreign countries. We want them back home. We want them to go back so that we can get their jobs that they're taking. So their cry and their tears, we're not going to hear them. But now that when I'm crying, I'm going to want God to hear me because somehow I'm religious. And this is what the religious teachers, I understand it, has taught them. Taught them because you're Christian, God will hear you. They don't teach them that says because you do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. Then that's how you're blessed. The religious teachers is not teaching them that when you listen to the cry of the poor, if you're in trouble and you cry, God will hear you. What they're saying is that says if we are in trouble, what we need to do is hurt those who are suffering. We need to send them back to areas where people are suffering. But when we are in trouble, God's going to hear us, and it won't work. And somebody say, oh, you sure it won't work? Yeah, it won't work because there's a God. And truth can't be meddled with. Because God's word will not come back to him void. So it says, he also shall cry, but shall not be heard. So when you don't see the pain of others, when you don't identify with those who are less fortunate, those who are beaten up, and you beat up others, then when your time comes, who's going to deliver you? So this is why I love with Christ. Christ just teaches us from day one. Don't view yourself as the high and mighty. They have their reward. That's what Christ says. They have their reward. Don't view yourself as those who oppress the poor. They have their reward. Don't view yourself as those that are the ones that sit there and mock those who are less fortunate. They have their reward. You simply do as Christ. Christ identified with those who are suffering and he blessed the unworthy. And you say, I'm going to bless no matter what. Because you know what? I have one life to live. I'm all right. I'm going to take care of you. You're not going to hurt me. If I bless you, he ain't taking nothing from me. I don't care how much I give or you give. God's going to always bless us. The more we bless is the more God blesses us. That's how I see it. James chapter 2 verse 5 and 6 says, hearken, my beloved brethren, hath not God chosen the poor of this world rich in faith, and heirs of the kingdom which he had promised to them that love him? But ye have despised the poor. Do not the rich men oppress you, and draw you before the judgment seats? Plural. When you think about this here, as we move forward in history and we're going closer and closer to that great getting up morning, think about the fact that God has chosen the poor in this world to be rich in faith. People often wonder, why is it that certain people preach certain truths that from the mainline pastors, the pastors that are in the elite, you can't get anything sensible out of them, anything cutting edge, anything really serious and urgent? Because that's just what it is. This is just the reality. The poor, God has made rich in faith, and heir to the kingdom which he had promised. So just imagine these people are rich in faith, and here's to the kingdom. You ought to love them. I love them. Well, somebody might say you're one of them, in the sense that, you know, don't have much over here. Here's to the kingdom which he had promised. So when you beat up on the poor, you're really on God's side. You really beat up the people who are rich in faith. When you live and you hate upon those who are rich in faith, how is that working? You removing from your midst those who are serving God and blessing the society and living moral lives. That can't be good. So here, was it good for Israel when they beat up on Christ? Remember, their beat up on Christ was the closing of their probation as a people, because they saw Christ as less than. It is to me a forever statement that you don't beat up on those who are less than. You don't oppress the poor, because you might be oppressing one who is a true follower of Jesus Christ. And yet claiming and say, oh, because we're rich, we're God's blessed. Just think about it right now. Why would I have to even be concerned and careful with even like one of the stories going on right now in the international news with Israel and the Palestinians? We don't endorse in either of those groups because they've been at each other's neck. You can't side, because you're not really siding with Israel. What you're siding with is American hegemony and American power. I'm basically saying whoever they choose as a victor will beat up the other group for. And we'll marginalize, oppress them, and beat them down. Can't do that. But they say, oh, we're doing this. The evangelicals believe they're doing this to endorse Jesus and to promote Jesus, because that's what Jesus would want. I find it very curious that if you read a story in the New Testament, there's two scenarios that come to my mind real quickly. The story of the Good Samaritan. It was that same person who was the hated of the Jews to help somebody that was beaten up. And then the second story, the woman at the well. Christ was always trying to reach those Samaritans and bless them. Christ's method and system is different from the evangelicals and the mainline churches and the political elite in America and in the world. Christ was saying, hey, look, I'll bless those Samaritans, even though they're hated by my people. It's a different, total different attitude Christ has, and that's why we follow Christ. Even though it might offend the religious elite in our country and the political and the rich people in our country, we follow Jesus. And they say, well, we serve the same God. I'm questioning that more and more, because it's we serve the same God by name. Everybody say Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. But Christ said, they will say, Lord, Lord, in that day, but they do iniquity. But what is your idea of Jesus? Do you serve God in spirit and in truth? Because I say, although the Jews were against the Samaritan, Christ says, look, to be perfect, what you do, you just bless. Whoever wants the blessing, because you could try to bless, not everybody wants the blessing. You could wave at people and say hi, not everybody will wave back. But those who want to receive the wave, you give them the wave, you bless them. You can't force people. The sun shines on the just and the unjust, but not everybody will go outside and get some sun. That's not God's fault. And then some people, when they go outside, they get too much sun and fry themselves. Again, that's not God's fault. So here it says, but ye have despised the poor, it says, do not the rich men oppress you and draw you before the judge seat. Think about it, even as we, just to make this plain, because somebody say, well, what are you getting at? Well, I thought I got there, but I'll say this because we're running out of time. Just think about it. If you were a carpenter, and even in the past, you had worked for many of these rich, you would be dragged in court and you'd be messed up by them. I had people I know. I remember I had this guy who used to worship with him, and he used to do tile work. And he would tell me how many times he goes into rich people's home. He finished the job and they wouldn't pay him the rest of the money. And he says the only option I have was to go to court. But he said, what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to court. They're going to bring a lawyer and they're going to win, because they're going to claim the job is subpar. And I remember he would tell me all these stories after stories. And I say, I just don't know what to say. It's because they're crooked. They want to work, but they don't want to pay for it. And then I remember when Donald Trump was running, and this how many people who were like carpenters, people who were plumbers, people who were various different people who basically will have finished the work and then tell them, oh no, I'm gonna pay you less, and if you don't want the less money, we'll see you in court, drag you in court and beat you up. But yet we see this is the type of society. Nothing has changed, if you understand what I'm saying. Nothing has changed. I believe Christ had suffered some of these things by the hand of the rich elite in the Jewish system, because he's a carpenter. If you're a worker, you understand. And so when we follow Jesus, it's not some ideological following of Jesus, even though it might not be comfortable for people who want to worship the rich. This is real following of Jesus. Let me see if I can get you Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 7 through 5. So Christ suffered and identified with those who are less fortunate, those who are unworthy, those who are not the religious elite and the political elite and social elite and all that stuff. You see today the church is like, man, they just want, this is what they think, oh, we are endorsed if we have a whole bunch of these rich people, following up the church and just come in there with their pride and arrogance. This is not an endorsement of anything. Deuteronomy 15 verse 7 onwards says, if there be any among you, a poor man of one of thy brethren within any of thy gates in thy land, which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not harden thy heart, or shut it thy hand from thy poor brother. But thou shalt open thine hand wide unto him, and shalt surely lend him sufficient for his need in that which he wanted. So when Christ came and says you must give to those a little extra. Notice he didn't say here, because some people say, oh, when Christ was teaching, he was teaching just New Testament principles. No, he was teaching the same Deuteronomy. He said, if a person asks you for this, give him extra. So if somebody say, hey, could I get a pound of flour from you? Are you looking at him and saying, a pound of flour? What is that going to do for you? You're a grown man. You need 2 pounds. I think that's what Christ is saying here. He didn't say to give him 5. He just says, give him sufficient to his need. Notice the word here is need. People misunderstand what Christ is saying often. Believe you should give everything you have away. No. It says according to what the man need. That is want, is need. In that which he wanted. So he wanted some flour. He said, look, you need 2 pounds. 1 pound is not good enough. It's not going to help you. It's just going to make you partly satisfied. Look at this here. Beware that there be not a thought in thy wicked heart, saying, the 7th year of the year of release is at hand, and thy eyes be evil against thy poor brother, and thou givest him naught, and he cry unto the Lord against thee, and it is sin unto thee. In other words, he say, hey, look, I need $1,000 from you. And you say, man, the year of Jubilee coming, what if he don't pay me back? I might not get the money back. But you know the man needed it, and the man know you have the money. And he said, what, man, I'm going to cry. And he cried, God here. God says, look, it's going to be sin. Somebody say, how can this be sin? It's sin because you didn't do right. You know that you have it and you could give the man the money. Give the man the money. Or lend him the money. Verse 10, thou shalt surely give him, and thine heart shall not be grieved. Notice God is saying, look, even your heart wicked, you can't even be grieved. You better give him with a smile in your heart. Grieve when thou givest unto him, because that for this thing the Lord thy God shall bless thee in thy works, and in all that thou puttest thine hand unto. Before I read the last text, I find it fascinating that the people who are most ardent against the poor are the people who are the religious conservative. This is like the weirdest thing in light of so many Bible passages that tell them, don't do wicked. You better open your hands wide and bless the people. And they're clamping down, and then they're praying every week for God to bless them. And you know what happened? More curses are coming, more disasters, because they're not doing right. God called us to be kind, and they're not kind, but yet they're claiming the Bible and they're claiming Jesus. Verse 11, for the poor shall never cease out of the land. Therefore I command thee, not I ask thee, this is not a good idea. This is command. Thou shalt open thy hand wide unto thy brother, to thy poor and to thy needy in the land. This is all Christ recognized. So it's my encouragement to you. You recognize this way, you identify this way, you work to bless. And somebody said, well, what if I'm poor? Well, just make your petitions be known not only to God, but to your brethren, just in case they don't know. And if you need a blessing, reach out to your brethren especially the ones that you know have some money, and say, just show them this text and say, open your hands wide. Give me a call, whatever it is. Or if I can help you, I definitely will. I'm more than willing, because I don't believe that if you're in need, now you're in need, not your want, whatever you want it to satisfy your need. If you need to be fulfilled, I believe that that's what your brethren are put here for, those who love the Lord, to bless you in whatever way we can. This is what it is, and this is how we identify Christ and live a life of righteousness. Let us pray. We thank you, Lord, again for your love towards us, for seeing, dear Lord, the depths of our needs, the depths, dear Lord, of the things that we are in need of, especially, dear Father, the saving grace of Jesus Christ. Our heads need deliverance, our lives need deliverance, and you said Jesus Christ to deliver us. We thank you for this. We pray, dear Lord, that you may be with us as we go through the rest of this day, that you may put forward these thoughts in our mind, whatever I've missed, whatever I've not said right. I pray that your blessing on each and every one that's here listening, that you may bless them by thy Spirit, dear Lord, and as you do for our prayers, do for even these talks. This is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you tomorrow morning, where we should talk about natural health. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with Jesus.